Our lives are often interrupted by routine. We get caught in the rut of everyday tasks that we lose sight of all of the opportunities we have to acknowledge the splendor of simply being. This rut is specifically the crux of why I travel so much, despite what my bank account tells me I should do. I travel not so that I may escape my life here in Houston, but for life not to escape out of me. Throughout these adventures, different people have come into my path and interacted with me, whether to tell me which way the Colosseum was in Rome or to teach me about the lifestyle in the Dominican Republic. These travels have taught me that small conversations I've had with strangers in foreign cities have bigger implications on how humanity interacts, where our unity really comes from, and why I now view the world in the way that I do. Now here's the fun part for you guys. You get to come with me on a couple of flights in the next 10 minutes to meet a couple of the remarkable strangers through my studies abroad. Our first stop is going to be the beautiful island of Formosa. Here I want you all to meet my good friends, Amy and Chippy, who I studied with in Taiwan. Amy, Chippy, and I frequently talked about very many different subjects, including the differences of culture, tradition, and lifestyles between our two countries. For those of you who don't know, Taiwan is the second safest country in the world behind Japan. I come from Lebanon, a place that's not exactly as safe. I have survived bombings and attacks of my hometown, and I constantly worry for my family overseas. At one point, the girls say to me, "In Taiwan, nothing like this ever happens. We have only ever known peace." I replied, "In my country, there are children who don't know that peace exists. They have only ever known war." As you can imagine, we became silent for a few minutes. I took that opportunity to imagine what my hometown would be like in complete peace long term. And I bet they were imagining their beautiful city of Taipei being bombed and destroyed. Even though we were talking about differences, we found a moment that we shared, that we connected, and shared in our humanness. What they did in that moment was venture to a part of the world that they otherwise would not have been able to go to, but at the same time changed my view on world security. When I was in Taipei, I could walk around at any time of day or night with all of my stuff, go anywhere within the town, and feel 100% safe and secure. I have learned that we should not be suspicious of people everywhere that we go, and that peace on a large scale is something that's possible, and Taiwan is an example of that. I now have hope that peace on a global scale is something that will become a reality in the future. How about we go dancing? We are now in the magnificent city of Prague in the Czech Republic at a place called the Communist Bar, and it's not what it sounds like, I promise. A few of my friends and I were studying here one summer and decided to get away from the stresses of our economics class and just go out. Well, when we thought about getting away, we didn't exactly think that we would end up in Singapore. At the venue, we were dancing. We noticed that there was a group of foreigners on the other side of the room that were watching us and then copying our dance moves. Somehow or another, we found out that they were from Singapore, and we spent the entire night doing ridiculous dance moves for them to copy. We barely used any words throughout the entire night, but we all had a remarkable evening. Words are not something that are necessary for you to be able to communicate and connect with other humans. Think of this concept of a grassroots diplomacy. It is where we all have this innate willingness to be there with one another without judgment, but with empathy. It's a way for us to communicate through one another through this shared universal language that is expressed through our bodies and through our emotions. How about we quickly take a trip to Mexico? Here, I want you all to meet my beautiful host sisters, Paloma and Brenda. Paloma is a passionate dancer who is frequently conflicted between following her passions and pleasing her mom. And we all know how that goes. We want to follow our dreams and aspirations. Our parents want us to follow the degrees. Brenda, on the other hand, works full-time, but that doesn't get in the way of her having fun. She works really hard, but she enjoys life even harder. My sisters and I frequently talked about the different aspirations that we have in life, whether that's dancing professionally for Paloma, kissing dolphins for Brenda, or traveling to even more countries for me. Finding this balance between reaching our dreams, but also having this deep connection to our families, where we only want what's best for them, can be difficult sometimes, but that doesn't deter us from trying anyway. What happens is, especially for those of us right now in this juncture in our lives, where we aren't exactly sure what it is that we want to do yet, and we feel this tension because we aren't exactly whole quite yet, what ends up happening is eventually we all share in these common concerns for figuring out our purpose in life and figuring out who we are meant to be. After these conversations, I felt more in tune with the world that we live in. Each one of these people that talked to me in any country, any city, gave me a moment of their time, a moment that they are never going to get back, to risk giving me a piece of their lives that might have been their proudest accomplishment, their biggest fear, or their deepest secret. Out of differences, it would have been easy for me to tell them, I'm in a rush and I'm not interested in anything that you have to say. It would have been even easier for me to just ignore them completely. But when we avoid and ignore those who aren't like us, we strip away the human traits that ultimately bond us together. And I think that when we do that, it is far more dangerous and destructive than any discomfort that can come out of conversation. Differences are merely an accident of birth. They are not something that we should fear. Taking a moment to talk to a stranger helps us understand his perspective and recognize those human traits that do bring us together. You should always embrace the opportunity and the moment that you have to speak up, because you never know what lessons might come from it. That vulnerability, though, that is the glory of traveling. It's where you're walking around, you have no idea where you're going, you can't read any of the street signs around you, and you don't understand any language that you hear around you. It's where you have just a basic understanding of how things work where you're at. And you're relying on universal sign language to hopefully cross the streets somewhat reliably without completely endangering your life and then having a driver yell at you in Chinese for it. Nothing, no other activity stimulates your inner 7-year-old, your childlike wonder, and your curiosity, like being completely unaware of your surroundings in a foreign country. When that happens, your life then becomes a series of interesting guesses, and that's the adventure of it. Sorry about that. When a stranger walks into your path, your travels then become more than just your sightseeing selfies and life-endangering crosswalks. It becomes a change within you, deep inside your heart and soul. And that change lives on past the end of your trip. Each piece of a person that you take in becomes a piece of you. My friends that you just met, it is through their backgrounds, their stories, and their perspectives that I have grown to become a more open and aware person. This is why who I am today is where I've been. We ought to recognize that there is something beyond the symbols of religion, tradition, and ethnicities that separate us, that ultimately we are all the same, and that we share a common story, a common narrative. We recognize and consequently dismiss stereotypes and learn to appreciate the perspectives of other cultures and points of view. We tend to look for unity with others through similarity because it's safer, because it's more comfortable. What we ought to do is embrace our diversity and unite in that sense. We ought to recognize that we have all absorbed this story of what it is to be humans, that ultimately we are all the same, and that we should create our unity in our diversity. I encourage you all to spend your money on experiences like these instead of on material possessions. Traveling is the one thing that you can do that really does make you richer, despite, again, what my bank account might tell you. Take a moment to speak to that stranger. Strike up a conversation. Embrace the world that is around you. Just go. Find that interconnectivity through social and casual interactions, and yes, that is a camel. Find that stranger and just sit down and talk. You have nothing to lose, but maybe a couple of minutes, but you have a ton to gain. Give him a piece of you and receive a piece of him. And in that moment, the world will freeze, your souls will become infinite, and all of your thoughts, worries, to-do lists, and fears will all disappear. Just go out there and discover what you can. And above all, watch with glittering eyes the world around you, because the most beautiful secrets are hidden in the most unlikely places. And those who don't believe in the magic will never find it. Thank you.